Okay, the employment arena is overwhelmingly biased towards women and against men. And this poster on R True Off My Chest proves it to be so with his experiment. And when we're done reading this, we'll go to this take on the same post from Mr. Obvious. And we have to debunk what Mr. Obvious has to say because he actually obscures the situation for men. Now, first we'll read this. This poster says, I sent 100 applications as a man and as a woman. It's much better being a woman. Well, duh. It's much better being a woman in every case. So I did an experiment. I worked in CS. I expect that means computer science. And I decided to test what the gender bias is. What made him think of doing this is probably because he was noticing it in the first place. So he wanted to make sure. So I took my CV and changed the name to a female name. I'd send it out with my real name and then a few days later or a few days before with a female name. Out of 100, my applications with a male name got 7 responses for an interview. The female name got 45 responses. So the female resume was 650% more likely to get a call back than the resumes were, and the resumes were identical. So the only thing that was changed was the gender. Wow. So it's not even 50% would have impressed me. This is 650%. So then I thought, what about someone looking for working class jobs? It's very smart of him because that way you couldn't say that it's just computer science or white collar. That's the issue. So I decided to focus on restaurants, that is servers, hosting, etc. Made a fake resume and responded to Craigslist ads with both male and female names. Sometimes the male went first, sometimes the female went first. Out of 100, the male name got 10 responses. The female name got 87 responses. So the female resume got 870% more responses. So it's even worse. Okay, so this guy found out what really he always knew. By the way, my personal experiences back this, because I know women that would get bored of their job and just quit their job because they were bored, pick one up the next day. When I quit my job that I hated after 20 years, it took me a couple of years to really get employed again. That's how huge the bias is. So this guy's only pushing what we all know anyway. Now, we'll get to Mr. Obvious and how he makes the situation worse. The first is how he approaches it. The vibe he gets off, this serious issue for men.
These days, a Redditor does a social experiment where they send 100 job applications as a man and 100 job applications as a woman. These are the shocking results. Hey guys, gals, and pals, Mr. Obvious here, and today we need to talk.
Mr. Obvious here, and today. Why is this guy approaching this important men's issue like a clown going to a kid's party? See, this is men. This is another reason why men don't get taken seriously. Now, we'll skip ahead. We don't have to read this again, but we'll also show you how this guy will purposely take the race bait because that obscures the situation. It's a situation about sex and gender, and race is thrown in there to derail from that. And he gives into it.
Say that it is fairly recent. So we're going to take a look at the following post by a Reddit user named Kakakan. This post currently has 1,850 upvotes. Here it says, I'm not even a male Caucasian, but for some reason, this pissed me off.
Brian, so it's a guy. And he's got his head buried in the sand too. For some reason, this pisses me off. He knows why it is because he knows it has nothing to do with race. He knows it's about being male. This is a male bigotry or bigotry against men. Because that's why he's get pissed off. That's why he doesn't need to be a Caucasian.
How do I respond? And the following screenshot was posted, and it shows how their recruiting is discussing hiring some people. Here you can see. If you have time, may I ask you to take a pass at these resume and LinkedIn profiles and provide your feedback? Here are my initial thoughts. It shows Brian, someone named Brian. Some of that is blanked out, but it says, understand machine learning. He has managed vendors, and he has a bachelor's degree in food science and technology. Cons. He claims excellent attention to detail, but has several grammatical errors and misspelled relevant on his resume. Okay, that's a fair criticism.
So basically, he has no cons.
I actually agree. Then it says, he would be another Caucasian male on the team, but if he's the best fit, that's fine. If it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and says the N-word,
Yeah, see, he's making it about race. This isn't about race.
it's probably racist. Yeah, so, what this HR person did, and I do believe that this is the source of the problem, HR. But what I believe is the root.
Now, he's wrong about HR being the source. HR makes it worse. It augments the problem, but it's not the source. Because after all, this guy, this poster, who did this experiment with all the businesses he sent his CV to, were they female run or had HR departments? Especially the blue collar jobs, did they have HR departments there? No. So you can't really blame HR, even though HR is part of the problem. It's about a bias against men by the general population.
Root of the problem is the fact that if you are male, especially a Caucasian male in today's workforce, you are being discriminated against. So why are these HR representatives discriminating against men? At the end of the day, I think it's very simple. Here we are on hrdive.com.
Now, notice he's defeating his own talk about race, because he even showing it, HR is overwhelmingly white as well as being female. So notice race doesn't matter. You can have all white people if it's women, right? So race has never been a part of the problem.
Here it says, HR is overwhelmingly white and female, data indicates. Here the story says, 71% of HR professionals are female. According to a Namely HR Careers report, the HR platform for mid-sized companies said its 2018 Workplace Diversity Report revealed women represented 67% of the HR force, with 65% of HR professionals identifying as white. Okay, so the majority of people who work in HR are in fact female. Why?
That's true, because HR is an easy, clean, white-collar job with authority over men. And you don't really have to know much to be a bigot, do you? So of course it's overwhelmingly female. Women have worked for decades to get these easy jobs, and men love to give them these easy jobs. So it's both genders are involved.
Why is this a problem? Well, according to the latest studies, research found that while both women and men have more favorable views towards women, women's in-group bias were 4.5 times stronger than those of men, and only women, not men, showed cognitive balance among in-group bias, identity, and self-esteem, revealing that men lack a mechanism that bolsters automatic preference for their own gender. Okay, let's break down that statement, folks. Basically, women have a very strong in-group bias. Women prefer women. Men, on the other hand, do not discriminate based on gender, but women do.
See, now that's just demonstratively false. This is a guy who calls himself obvious. But it's obvious that it is because, again, this guy who sent his CVs out, all those businesses, most of them were probably male run or owned, right? So men have an out-group bias towards women, which is just as potent as women's in-group bias to themselves. So the source of the situation comes from both genders. He's demonstrably wrong about men being better at women than this. If we want to make this a better world, we have to make men aware of their bias and push them to fight against that bias.
So if 67% of HR is female and they're hiring mostly females, we could be seeing this bias at work.
And trust me, having HR mostly males won't change anything. The world is full of male feminists. And frankly, even without the being a feminist, men are hostile to other men. Now, here, this guy, Mr. Obvious, will miss the obvious contradiction in this guy's statement. First, men fall behind women. Men aren't falling behind women, they're being held back. Two, more female graduates will change workforce for the better, but create a dangerous pool of underachieving and alienated men. How does creating a pool of underachieving and alienated men make the workforce better? It's a contradiction. Now we'll see if Mr. Obvious catches the obvious.
But it's not just in the workplace that men are falling behind. Many studies are showing that men are falling behind in education, women make up the majority of college students, and things are just getting worse and worse for men. Here on thetimes.co.uk, men fall behind women, and that's a problem. More female graduates will work for the better, but create a dangerous pool of underachieving and alienated men. Here the story says, at the root of many social pathologies that afflict modern American life may be the striking divergence in male and female educational attainment. They say that at the end of the 2021 academic year, according...
But it's not really male and female attainment, is it? Because they're framing it as if the men, again, are no longer attaining it because they themselves, there's something wrong with men. There isn't. Men are being held back.
According to data compiled by the Wall Street Journal, women made up 59.5% of college students, and men only 40.5%. So what do I believe is happening here?
Okay, and see what he did? He did that clown noise. So he's taken the false frame that people want men to do well, and they're just screwing up. When the fact is, people are hostile to men, both sexes, and they want the men to do poorly, and they're bigoted against men. So these guys, they fail every time. This guy has a doomer icon somewhere, as you can see. And these guys are all the same. They're anti-male, they're male hostile, and they're antisocial. And frankly, one of the reasons they bring race in, the reason they bring race into it, is that they're not less angry that they're getting zapped as a sex by women, and more they're just angry that other men are giving a leg up over them.
Well, ultimately it's very simple. In recent years, it has become very popular, the idea that in order for women to
It isn't a recent idea. This has been working since the 1960s.
Be equal, you have to take away opportunities from men and give them to women. True equality would be 50% of the students are male, 50% of the students are female. That is equality. Now, this article goes on to say that the most startling statistic may be that white men are just disappearing from college entirely. You have a famous story here about an Indian.
We don't need to go on about this. This has nothing to do with race. And he just got through talking about how it's men that's disappearing, not just white men, right? So we'll go ahead. Now this is, let's just get just a minute. There, and of course, he's focusing on the man being a white guy. And again, the reason why it bothers him, why race bothers him, is because he's more concerned about other groups of men getting ahead of him. He's not really concerned that women are bashing men. Okay, now.
In society. Every other day, we have more young men who don't have jobs, who don't have futures, and who don't have hope, creating an entire generation of young men with nothing to lose, and nothing. Like, they have no jobs, they have no future, they have no educations, they can't get financial aid, they can't get hired. You're creating a generation of men with nothing to lose. Is it any wonder that we're seeing more tragedies in the world, more people going crazy, more people committing atrocities?
So he's bring up a threat narrative, and he's using gender neutral term. Why is saying people? Mr. Obvious, why is saying people? It's men, right? And I wouldn't talk about this. Like I would, but not in his way. I'd say, I blame society, yes, for shitting on men and men going ape. but he's kind of threatening them, like saying, look, these men will get violent.
No, none of it is surprising. But what is the response by the woke left and the groups that...
See, and this is it, woke left. This whole video has been talking about how men are discriminated because of their sex. And then he talks about feminists being woke. And then he talks about left-right politics. Mr. Obvious, if you're so obvious, what has the right wing done? Like if the right wing is not involved in this, or let's say if they're opposing this, how come they always fail? How come the woke left, how come they succeed all the time? Because the right wing is no different from the left wing. So this guy is obscuring the situation and making it about his pet little problems. You know, no, I should say not problems, pet obsessions. He's obsessed with left-right politics, and he's obsessed with the fact that other minority groups of men might get ahead of him. And this guy has a check mark against on his channel. And he's got 250,000 subs because there's lots of men like him that actually YouTube is glad to have guys like him on the tube, because they know they avoid the issue and they work against men's best interest.
Push this affirmative action, feminism, diversity nonsense? We need more. There should be only 10% of white people working. Who cares?
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, I've shown what this doomer is about, right? This guy's a doomer. He's antisocial. He's actually male hostile. His big concern is that other groups of men are getting ahead of him. He's one of those guys who's like picking cotton out in the fields, and he's angry that one of the other cotton pickers gets to work in the house as a house slave. You know, that's his issue. And guys like him make things worse for men. When this guy who posted on our true off my chest really pointed out what the problem is. So, okay, we'll end it here.